Before we get into the episode today, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are gathered on and pay my respects to elders both past and present, as well as acknowledging any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander educators who are tuning in. Hi everybody, welcome back for another episode of Educator Yarns. Today I am joined by Lisa Mavin, who's from Tilly's at Rutherford. Yes, I'm saying that right. But before we jump into today's session, I just want to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we are all gathered on today and pay my respects to elders both past and present, as well as acknowledging any Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander listeners that are tuning in. Just so you know who you are going to be listening to today, I'm going to read out Lisa's bio. She is the nominated supervisor of Tilly's Play and Development Centre in Rutherford. She has dedicated 18 years to the early education sector, working in both long daycare and out-of-school hours services. Her husband and 2 children are proud Gomeroi men, and this connection to culture through her family has greatly influenced her personal philosophy. Through deep listening, mutual learnings, and cultural respect, she strives to create a culturally safe environment where every child feels a sense of belonging and acceptance. By embracing Aboriginal culture and actively engaging in reconciliation through action, she aims to foster a culturally inclusive and responsive environment where every child can thrive and feel a connection and belonging. She believes that implementing culturally safe practices is essential to ensuring cultural responsiveness for Aboriginal children and families. That's a pretty good bio, I have to say. I have been a long time follower of you guys on Facebook, and I love everything that you share. And I know you guys have also done social media takeovers with us before, and shared some great stuff in your program. But do you want to just share a little bit about your personal educational journey? Did you start at Tilly's, or had you been at other centres, Lisa, before there?
No, so when I was 17, I took a traineeship position at a different service. I completed that. From there, I've gone into Certificate 3 roles. I had my eldest son quite young at 20, so I went and had some time with him. And when I come back into the industry, I actually worked at what we call preschool in Newcastle. So I come back to a preschool. I then did a diploma and then have moved into a nominated supervisor role in Ush, and then come over to Tilly's about 5 years ago in a nominated supervisor role of a long daycare service, and now studying my Bachelor of Early Education. So I've sort of done all the things.
Yeah, you have done.
Yeah.
And you've worked at a great preschool. So what we call preschool is an Aboriginal specific preschool. It's run by the Lands Council, isn't it? Or it's connected to somehow?
Yes, yeah. And they have two. They have a preschool in Glendale, which is the one that I worked at and in the playgroup there, and then they have a one in Wickham as well. Generally, they take Aboriginal educators, but sometimes if they don't have Aboriginal educators, they will take non-Aboriginal people, but they obviously look at how you connected in community. So obviously knowing my husband, my family, I was accepted within that role to do that, and it was just contracted based until they had an Aboriginal person with the right qualifications that wanted to jump in. But obviously a great experience to have being involved, working alongside them and see and witness what they do and how they do it, be within that environment to ask the questions and then reflect on, my personal life, raising, an Aboriginal child at that time. So it was something that, they have multifaceted levels, I guess, that come into that structure and how that's run and operated. But generally, just by Aboriginal organisations. And
so how would you say that Aboriginal preschools are different to what you typically see in a mainstream service?
One of the big things I've seen when I was there, is the children call the educator's auntie. So there's just different protocols that they are allowed to have within those services. The pedagogy, is different because they're Aboriginal educators that can do things with Aboriginal children, whereas in a mainstream service, I find, there's a lot of hurdles that you face around art, what you do around tokenistic, like everything being tokenistic, because we're not Aboriginal people facilitating that. So I think the biggest difference I found there is just being within the culture just in every aspect. Food, I remember educators in the kitchen cooking Johnny cakes, and it was just not something that was sporadic. It was something that you're seeing every single day, whether it be through food, dance, just all those things were just so embedded in every single aspect within that environment, which is so different than what you see in mainstream services, which I found so inspiring.
Yeah.
Which obviously also impacted my personal philosophy and what I wanted to achieve if I wasn't in an Aboriginal service.
Mm-hmm. And so now at Tilly's at Rutherford, how have you tried to take that sort of experience and bring it into where you are now in your role?
So I think my journey here has been a little bit different. Coming in, there wasn't as much obviously as what I was used to in that sense. But coming into a role where you can be an advocate and strive for change, I have taken what things I have learnt, but then had to adapt it in ways that are appropriate. So I know that obviously just getting to know families, the community, educators over a period of time, and then looking at things and having those conversations with my family of how we can change things that we did here. So I know that, we looked at the 8 ways of learning and that just wasn't working. I found that we needed to have a really in-depth understanding of history before you can sort of implement other things. So I took everything away, even acknowledgement of country I took away. And we focused solely on education around history and how that impacts families that are using our service. And then over time have looked at the things that I've seen in, an Aboriginal preschool to see, you can't call educators auntie, you can't do all these things. So how can we adapt things into our program and curriculum and pedagogy environments? But it's taken a lot of time and a lot of relationship building because, I know that with my husband, for example, people think because he's Aboriginal, he's just expected to give his story and information. So, I'm very conscious of that and know that, we need to work on relationships and build those relationships before some people will feel comfortable enough to give you those things to help create change within the space here.
I think that's it's really interesting. Like, so taking everything away, including acknowledgement of country, and just really going back to that foundation as to why we're doing what we're doing and exploring the history and so forth. And really that's where you need to start, because if people don't understand why they're doing it, the rest is redundant. So when educators ask me, well, they tell me that they're worried about being tokenistic. I tell them it has nothing to do with tabletop experiences. It has everything to do with what's happening intrinsically within you and your understanding. And even with things like acknowledgement of country, I know that a lot of services worry about, well, are we going to sing it, or how are we going to get children engaged and mix it up and all that sort of stuff, which I think is important so it doesn't become a stale rote learnt part of the program. But then if we delve deeper and we say, well, you're talking here about acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which you are on. Well, who are the traditional owners? And they'll say, oh, the Darawal people or whatever. And I'll say, yeah, but who? What are their names? Like what are the families that are known for being the traditional owners of where you are? And then when they say, well, we pay our respects to elders, both past and present. Well, who are they? Do you know them? Who are their names? How have you connected with them? What do you know about them? So how can you acknowledge the traditional owners and pay your respects to the elders past and present if you don't know who they are? So really going back to that foundation and making every decision that you make meaningful, I think is really strong and powerful. So good on you for doing that. So how long have you been in this role for? And when you took everything away and went back to basics, how long from then till now has it been?
I think it was only within a couple of months.
Okay.
But obviously I've come into a role in a leadership position. So obviously I'm in a capacity to share my thoughts and how I see and view things.
Yep.
But I think one of the pivotal changing moments was, when my husband would drop our youngest child off into care here. He would finish work and he might finish work at midday and he would be straight here to pick our child up. And, the educators would be like, why? Why doesn't he just leave him? He's having fun. Like, why can't he just stay? You leave him until the afternoon. And over time, Shannon built a relationship with the educators here, and then one day come in and said, I'm ready to talk, I'm ready to share. And he took, my cultural squad into a room. I planned like a time for a meeting that he could come in, and he took them into a room and shared a part of his story and why, there's certain people that are shared so easily that are safe people. And for our family, your general safe people and not necessarily safety for him. One being mainstream services in early childhood. He didn't see us as safe people. So, as soon as he finished work, he would come and pick his child up because he wanted him home with him. So I think he shared some stories from his family, and the girls come out in tears. So I think even that was a point where it's like, okay, we need to go deeper, because as families feel more comfortable, they may share things, and we need to have some sort of education around history and intergenerational trauma and how that's still very present in children in 2025. Even in my child, what my husband believes is what my son is taught. And if my husband doesn't feel comfortable or confident walking into this service, then my child is not going to feel safety at all times. So I think there was things that happened through my connection and my family coming here as well that we were more open to share because of the role I'm in, that led to more conversations, more questions, which ultimately my husband runs his own company, and over time he let educators send him questions and he collated them over maybe up to a 12-month period, just, questions that had come up throughout the time in what they're doing in experiences or just questions they had around history. And he compiled a cultural conversation tailored specifically for our centre, for the questions that our educators had and community here. So I feel like with our journey of this, there's been many things that we've looked at a lot differently, I guess, because we've had those things available to us. So that I found has been really beneficial. But then because of the way I speak and I can share our stories and things that I've experienced as a non-Aboriginal person in an Aboriginal family, he's then tailored training to the leaders that then feed down to us, from the approved providers, even attended those. So then, when they have conversations in management meetings with area managers, they're feeding down to nominated supervisors. I'm feeding down to my 2 ICs, my ed leaders that are then feeding down to, my educators. So it starts from the top with a real in-depth understanding of certain things that are impacting our centre and our community here.
Do you have many Aboriginal families attending your service?
We do now, yes.
Yeah, you do.
5 Aboriginal educators now as well.
How many, sorry?
5.
That's amazing. That's great. That's so good. And have you seen that change because you think that word has gotten out into community for the work that you're doing and showing that cultural safety journey? Yeah.
So, and my family is, my mother-in-law works at Naiwani Maitland Hospital birthing Aboriginal babies. She's an Aboriginal health worker. She said that she's had people come in and have spoken about my service, and she can say, well, actually, that's my daughter. Like she's married to my son. So I know through conversations that we are accepted within community to some degree with families, like they're going out and saying, this person's here and they do amazing things, and it's shared. Like we're obviously, like you said, we've done takeovers on Koori curriculum, and that, people are sharing that. So I think definitely doing these things and people having those conversations, it is getting out in community that we are a mainstream service that is very culturally responsive and is very, passionate about it being immersed in an Aboriginal perspective. So I think that's definitely one of the things, and educators, are now coming because they feel safe to say that they're Aboriginal and they want to be a part of that journey. So yeah, we've had, I think, 2 more Aboriginal educators join last year, like in traineeship roles, that are heard through community that, this is somewhere that they'd like to be.
Hi everyone, I'm just jumping in quickly to remind you all that Beck and I have a series of upcoming events and workshops all throughout Queensland where we'll be yarning about the new ELF principles, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives and sustainability. We'll be in Toowoomba, Cairns, the Gold Coast, Brisbane, Mackay, Townsville, you name it, we'll be there, and we hope to see you all there. All right, take care, everyone. Enjoy the episode. So you mentioned before you have a cultural squad.
Yeah.
Can you explain a little bit what that is?
Yeah, so we have a cultural squad where one of our Aboriginal educators asked to facilitate that. And then we have another educator who is from New Zealand, who is also on the squad as well. And then we have conversations with families and children to see who would like to be a part of that squad from all different backgrounds. And then I give them time throughout each week to have a meeting where they come together, work on goals, talk about strategies. I know that one meeting they all drew pictures of resources they would like and put on the area manager's desk, and said, this is from the cultural squad, this is what we'd like, so that we can work on our bush tucker garden, create a yarning circle. The educators will ask the children questions like, who can we ask about the symbols, or who can we ask if we can have a yarning circle? So they're talking to the children about where we can investigate those things. And we've reached out to the AECG. So we have Tabitha from the AECG who comes in just whenever, there's not necessarily a meeting time. She'll just pop in when she's in the area and does walkthroughs and has conversations with the children and those educators. And so that the cultural squad's more than just in our service, and the area manager will go down and have conversations and answer any questions around resources or training or people that can come in. And so there's a cultural squad within children and educators, but then sort of branches out where other people can be involved. But we're one of 12 Tilly's services. So then each service has their cultural squad, and then at certain times throughout the year, each cultural squad leaders will meet at a centre and have a big cultural squad meeting where they can, talk about any challenges they've had, any successes that they're really proud of, or, professional development that they've done, or books they've read. So it starts at sort of a centre level, and then we have a wider Tilly's cultural squad where all of our members come together to have a space, a safe space where they can share what they're learning, what they're up to, any challenges, or bring people in the AECG, or, if they want to, and some professional development or something, they can all do that at that level, and then have each other to bounce off in that space.
That's so good. What a good idea.
Yeah.
Is there a particular project or initiative that you've led that you're proud of that's made what you're doing successful? I know the partnership with your partner that you mentioned, but is there anything in the cultural squad? I think all of these things are pretty innovative, if you ask me, but is there anything else?
I don't think there's generally something just one project. I think that my overall thing would just be being the advocate in this space that I can be. And, we have almost 50 educators at my service. So I think one of the things I'm extremely proud of is, we are one of the largest centres in the Hunter, and, I've got this service that's full of all these educators that are so empowered and inspired to be in this space and be on that journey. So I think that's something that I'm really proud of, because sometimes it can be really hard to have 3 people on the same page, let alone, 50. And I have a long daycare service and an bush service here. So, again, 2 separate things in one roof, and then, educators that are doing split shifts and different, they're different, they're not under the EYLF, they're under the MTOP, and, just that accomplishment of knowing that we've still got so far to go, but over the last 5 years, we're all at a place where we're in different places in our journey, but we're all on the journey of working towards cultural responsiveness and, in being immersed in embedding Aboriginal perspectives. I think that in itself is just something that I'm extremely proud of, because it's not always easy.
And so it's definitely not always easy, and you have a very big team. So I think sometimes there's either end of the spectrum, there's a really small team and they don't have enough capacity to do all the things because there's not enough of them, if there's only 2 or 3 educators working at a preschool. And then there's big teams, and it's hard to get everybody on the same page and up to speed, because there's such a spectrum of different feelings and experiences that educators have had. So are there any particular resources or tools or programs that you've used to get everyone together?
Again, I think the cultural conversation that's been created just for our centre has been something that we've reflected on and used and continue to use ongoing. That's been something because it's come from educators within the centre, and that they all have conversations, within their rooms, at lunchtime. So it's all things that I know is relevant to hear. And if someone's asked it, someone else might be thinking, oh, I wonder, I just wonder if that's something we can do, or so we always go back to that. But because I am in an Aboriginal family and I have, you know, done this for quite some time, you know, they can come to me, and I always say to them, just ask me the question, and if I don't have an answer, you know, we can look at what that looks like to get the answer, whether it be a conversation when I'm at home and someone in my family asks what I'm doing in this space, and I'll be like, oh, actually, now you've brought it up, like I have this question. Or waiting for the AECG to pop in, or, you know, we have a local elder that'll pop in whenever he's in the area and wants to, and he'll ask me questions, you know, he'll challenge my thinking. So in those spaces where you're not sort of at people, if that makes sense, like, you know, you always hear people say, like, reach out to your elders, and it's like, but if everyone's reaching out to the same people, they sort of feel overwhelmed. So I don't want to be another, like, a person that's just reaching out every time we have a question. But, you know, we have books and things that, like, the cultural squad have a book, so if they ask questions, they'll write it in there so I can go back to and say, well, actually, you know, they've asked this, this and this, and we haven't got the answers to that yet. Or wait for, you know, the AECG to pop in and say, okay, yep, awesome, we've got this that we were thinking about displaying, what's your thoughts on that? But yeah, just using all of those things.
There's good tools and processes that you're working through.
So not sort of one, but many.
Yeah. And that's it as well. I think that it's about understanding that there's not that immediacy, that even culturally, when we have questions, there's a lot of waiting that happens. It's not like we want to know this, we're entitled to an answer and we need to know it now. Sometimes, particularly, you know, as you've mentioned, like a lot of services reaching out to the same small group of people, you have to wait because it can become overwhelming. And I've met Tabitha. I met her at one of the early childhood AECG meetings on the Central Coast. She popped in and I got to meet her, and I think she's fantastic. And I'm really excited that more AECGs in New South Wales are beginning to have a specific early childhood focus, rather than just really, as they were set up for primary schools. And you know, and often early childhood educators would go and wouldn't really find the content or the discussion so much relevant. So, but to have that same sort of format, but early childhood specific, I think is so exciting to see that's happening. Have you encountered any challenges or resistance regarding Aboriginal programs in your role?
There's, like I said, there's always, some things are not always easy because we have a large, you know, service, and we can't always have 50 people having, you know, the same conversation. So I think a challenge is not having everyone in the same space at the same time to listen to questions that are asked, and how I can adapt and make sure that, you know, this information is shared across the centre. So we do like wellness check-ins with educators. They can ask, you know, talk to me about anything. So I take them off the floor once a month, just one-on-one, so they can ask questions and I can give them feedback, like things that they might not be wanting to ask in front of everybody else. And, you know, like the communication, we have a morning meeting every morning where the leaders from each room come together with me and we discuss things at a centre level. So I think a challenge is just, again, having all the educators in the centre trying to have the same information. So thinking outside that square and challenging thinking of how we can make that work. You know, the cultural squad leaders can then go into the rooms and say, like, we've just spoken about this, what are your thoughts? Speaking with the children on the floor, you know, going out and saying, okay, you know, we've spoken about this, what's your thoughts on that? But I think, you know, like you said, there's challenges in having a really small team, and then there's challenges in having a really big team. The only other challenge I think that we're facing at the moment is, you know, we're very immersed in Aboriginal perspectives specifically. And when you say Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, it just sort of goes together. However, you can see a vast difference in Aboriginal perspectives and Torres Strait Islander perspectives in our centre. So, but having the knowledge of where to find information and education in that space, I am finding challenging.
So Deb, who was the artist of last year's NAIDOC Week poster, she's also an education consultancy that just focuses on Torres Strait Islander perspectives. And I think that she's fantastic. She's done a masterclass for us in the Koori Curriculum Club. And we've also had, and you can reach out to her directly to to get that. They Are Good Consultancy is the name, and I'll link it in the podcast notes of this episode. And then there's also the new book by Thomas Mayo and Bernard Namick Jr., whose father designed the Torres Strait Islander flag, which is called Our Flag. I'm looking for it because it's a podcast. You can't see me looking for it, but I have it here on my desk somewhere, which is called Our Flag. And it's a really great introduction into the Torres Strait Islander flag, but also elements of Torres Strait Islander culture. So I'm really excited because there'll be a series of those books, I think, sharing more information about Torres Strait Islander culture, which is exciting. What else have we had? There's quite a few, we do have quite a bit of content on the Koori Curriculum Club for members, but as I said, you can reach out to Deb directly to do some PD in that space, because you're right, it is Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples, and we're required, and should anyway, be doing both. But often it's a lack of awareness of where to actually go to get that information. We can get information in general about Torres Strait Islander peoples and culture, but specifically in an early childhood context. And that's what I always say to people: how can we embed an Aboriginal perspective if we don't know what the perspectives are of our Aboriginal community? And so there too goes that understanding, how can we embed a Torres Strait Islander perspective if you are not Torres Strait Islander and you don't know what the perspectives are of your Torres Strait Islander community and what it is that they want you to be including and teaching. We've also had quite a bit of Torres Strait Islander content on Play School. And some of you may know that's my other role as the cultural advisor on Play School, and we've been doing quite a bit of content over there as well, with more to come. So I love that that's a goal for you though, and you'll be able to apply hopefully some of these same processes to that. The obstacle will be is that you're lucky in the sense that you've got that connection with your partner's family, and that's where you've been able to go and get that information, where a lot of services, they don't have that. They don't have that personal relationship with somebody. So where do they go in absence of that? So you're going to find that same sort of obstacle now, potentially, with looking at Torres Strait Islander perspectives. But it's exciting that those resources are becoming available for sure. Have you got questions about nature play, sustainability, or how to meaningfully include Aboriginal culture in your early childhood program? Call 0253 000 306 and leave a voice message for the Educator Yarns podcast. Beck Burch from Bush Kindy's Australia and Jessica Staines from the Koori Curriculum will be answering your questions, offering practical advice, cultural guidance, and inspiring ideas to support your teaching and planning. Whether you're just starting out or looking to take your program deeper, your question could shape future episodes and support other educators across the country. Dial in today at 0253 000 306. I've had a look recently, and I shared it a week or two ago on the Koori Curriculum Facebook page of the vision that you have made for Tilly's. Do you want to talk a little bit about that vision? Because I saw it, I thought, what a great idea.
Yeah, so it sort of comes, so at the end of every year, we have a setup night where we all come together, get in our room teams and set up the environment and just have a general chat about where we want to go next year, what goals do we want to work on. So it sort of started there with the conversations about where we want to go, what we want to achieve, and myself and my 2IC Mel documented all of this information. And then moving into the start of this year, we do our morning meetings every morning. We talk about things. I brought it up. The team by then had conversations without us in present and things about what they want to achieve and what they want to do, and brought it all to me. And it was okay, what can we do that's, again, I'm really big on thinking outside the square. What can we do that's different, that we haven't done before, that keeps us accountable for what we're talking about? We're talking about this now, we're fresh. How can we make sure that we're constantly looking at, reflecting and working towards these goals? And then, we just come up with a vision board. So I was like, right, let's do some critical reflection time. So our educators at Tilly's all get a certain amount of hours per month critical reflection time off the floor covered. So we utilise some of that time to look at, different things, PD that they want to engage in, or anything around what they've come together with, what they want to achieve at a service level. And they've they all printed out little pictures, and we just come together and at a morning meeting and started sticking it all down. And then I thought, well, you know, how do we display it? And the team were like, let's put it in the hallway. Families can see what we want to achieve. You know, children can talk about it. Families can ask questions. Families can have input. You know, what do they want to see in our centre, and what do they want to see as goals as well? So it's a talking point, and then something that we're constantly always looking at to say, oh, you know what, we've done that, and then we can, you know, pull back to say, you know, what have we achieved against this vision board? And the educators are really excited about it. It's something that we haven't done before. It's a different approach than just having some dot points in a book or on a page. And then in conjunction with that, I also did a big whiteboard in our staff room, and I just wrote you know, we are thankful for. And over the first month of January, everyone wrote something on the board that they're thankful for being here. And the things that we seen written there was amazing. Things you wouldn't even think that educators are holding on to for what we do. So, you know, we have a breakfast bar, and, you know, I put noodles and things like that in case they forget their lunch. You know, they've written wellness checks, feeling culturally safe and supported, you know, while at work. So it was sort of a part of a few things that we've done, but again, leaving those things out so that we can always go back and say, you know, this is why, you know, we love our job. This is why we're here, and this is why we're doing this, because this is overall where we want to go with that, with the vision board. And, you know, some days you just have a day and you need something to read or look at and to go, yes, it regrounds you almost. Yeah. So just having a few of those things that, yeah, just help us stay grounded and regrounded.
There's some great ideas. I think they're great. I also know that you've done quite a lot of work with like bush tucker plants, and the lily pilly journey is one of the things that I remembered from your social media takeover that you did, and all the ways that you've used different bush tucker plants in your program. But I was wondering if you could give a little bit of a snippet of what does like the experiences look like? How does Aboriginal programs look at your service? What are some things that you do in the classroom with children?
So the lily pilly jam was done by an Aboriginal educator who we obviously have got bush tucker, we've got lily pilly plants around the service. So that was something that she led from conversations within her room when they were looking at certain things. And so she's done that as an extension, and then had conversations with me and the area manager about what that looks like around risk assessments, and, you know, who do we need to contact, you know, what things do we need to have. So I know that there was conversations with families who brought in coolamans so that they could use coolamans to put the berries in. And again, we've done a whole overhaul on our personal philosophies, and that is something that's very prevalent in her personal philosophies, Aboriginal pedagogy. So she was drawing from that and then implementing that within the rooms, and they made it, they put it in little jars, they created their own labels, and then it went out the front and was available for families to take home. And then I know that families took all the jams, and then families were sending, you know, photos of they were growing their own lily pillies at home, and they were not Aboriginal families. So it was something that went over a long period of time, that then, you know, families were sharing things and sending photos that we're now growing these plants, and then they brought them back and we planted them here. So families have taken them home, planted them, brought them back, and then they've been replanted in the garden here. So I think just looking at different ways that you can incorporate that into your program and your curriculum. It doesn't have to be things that you question yourself a lot on, you know, like art and things like that. You can do a lot of things, you know, with resources and from conversations with children that happen, that's what that was. They were investigating something, and then it come up through plants and discussions and lily pillies, and that we had lily pillies at Tilly's. So, you know, they were out looking to get the lily pillies, and they have to wait for some more to grow, and then, you know, that whole process. So
that's awesome.
Yes, sort of, yeah.
And so you mentioned you're not using, or you weren't using, the 8 ways of learning. Are you using it now?
We are, but we only brought it in last year, so I waited 3 years.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and how's that going?
Good. I think because there's our staff have also been here for quite some time. The retention of staff is amazing here. So I think everyone has sort of been on that journey and completely have a good understanding of history, and how those links actually link within the program and the curriculum that we offer. But the AECG come in also, and she has, you know, amazing resources and, you know, looks at how we're linking, asks questions, asks conversation, like, why have you linked it to this? So all of those things. So it is still a work in progress, because I want to know that there's understanding between, like with, you know, land links. Why have you linked that as a land link? Why have you linked that as community? So yes, it is implemented now. It is something that we're still working on, and that we have people, you know, like the AECJ come in and offer support and ask questions. But I think, again, it was just something we had other things that we were working on around history and education and all those things before using that. But it is implemented now, and they do seem to enjoy the conversations in the room too, when they're looking at how they're linking the 8 ways. So it is something that it's implemented now, but it did take a lot of time before I was comfortable. So,
it does take time, and it's not a race, is it? It's about making meaningful and sustainable changes, you know, and to bring everybody along on that process with you. And with 50 people that you're trying to bring along, that's a big thing. So we're going to wrap up in a minute, but I just thought it'd be good to ask you what advice you would potentially give to directors and other leaders that are in your position that are potentially just starting out and embarking on this journey. What advice would you give them?
I think the one thing that I always tell people is you don't have to be an Aboriginal person to be in a space to create change. You know, I think that a lot of people think that you need to be an Aboriginal person to come in and create cultural responsiveness. I think that as long as you're open to being on that journey, that's probably the biggest thing that I'd like anyone to take away that's in a nominated supervisor role, is you don't need to be an Aboriginal person. You just need to have the education and the willingness to advocate and learn, to share, you know, the knowledge. I'll never forget, I went to a wellbeing conference in Coffs Harbour, and, you know, they asked questions about what I did in my service, and, you know, I shared a little bit, and they said, you know, that's amazing, and what we need you to do is not tell us, but tell more non-Aboriginal people, because that's what's powerful. And that's stuck with me a lot, because, you know, what I got from them is, you know, they don't want to have to say it all the time and every day, but, you know, non-Aboriginal people having an understanding and sharing, you know, my stories and some experiences that I've had with other people is doing amazing things in this space. So I think, yeah, like if you're starting out, like it is, sometimes it can be scary, and you question yourself. But I think if I could just say to anyone, like, you don't have to be an Aboriginal person. You can be a great person as a non-Aboriginal person to be able to create change in that space. Just making sure, yeah, like we do have the education, and it is, you know, culturally appropriate, culturally safe, and making sure that we follow all those things. But I think, yeah, just knowing that you can be a person to create change.
I think, like, you've hit the nail on the head, and I hope everyone hears that loud and clear, because I think there is nothing more empowering than the stories of other educators that are doing the work, because it's relatable and it's inspiring and it shows that you can do it. And that's why I try to encourage as many educators as possible that I can see doing the work to get involved in things like our social media takeover, or to write a guest blog and to say, look, like, I'm just like you. And these are practical things that I have done with my team to create cultural change. And I think that is the most impactful thing that you can give. And it's your form of advocacy that you're giving to our profession. So good on you. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. And I just wanted to end with actually reading your nomination for one of our Educator of the Year awards. And it's disappearing on me, but here it is. It says, Lisa has a dedication to her vision for embedding Aboriginal perspectives within our service. Lisa has a commitment to developing strong, meaningful relationships with First Nations people that is at the heart of her personal philosophy. She has written an ebook reflecting her personal philosophy of embedding Aboriginal perspectives to share with the Tillies community. She has ensured the service has an active reconciliation action plan with Narragansett. She has embedded Aboriginal perspectives throughout the service, evident in environments, programs and practices, and this has been showcased on the Koori Curriculum Facebook and Instagram page for a social media takeover. She guides and mentors our team to create a culturally safe environment where all children experience a sense of belonging and acceptance. And so I just wanted to read that just because I feel like you deserve to be acknowledged for the work that you're doing. And I really do encourage anyone who's not already to go and follow Tilly's on their Facebook page, where you can see all the great examples of what they are doing. And I'll link that all in our show notes for you, so you can follow along on their journey. But thank you so much, Lisa, and congratulations.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to today's podcast. To find out more information about the Koori curriculum and how we can best support you in your early learning service, visit www.kooricurriculum.com.